Okay, so I wanted to talk about more about what that dream that I had the other night, and to set the stage again. I was in my old bedroom that I grew up in as a kid, and I was seeing this projector screen on a wall, and it was playing an episode of the Unslaved podcast by Michael Disarm and David Whitehead, and they were covering this topic, this idea of demon mythology in the Dark Ages, and in the history of the past few millennia, and they're covering this one demon, and they had all these different images of what the demon looked like, and it was just all these different interpretations, and one of them was an image of a stink bug, and at the time there was a stink bug showing up on their camera, on their screen. They go, oh my god, look at this coincidence, this synchronicity that the stink bug is on my screen as we're talking about the stink bug demon thing. And then it turned out that there was a stink bug on my projector screen. Somehow I was able to reach out and touch it and see, like, oh, that's actually a stink bug on my screen too. So it's like a double, triple stink bug synchronicity. And as I started to recoil from it and get back, I noticed that there was what I thought was a stink bug, like it was all of a sudden bigger, and it was crawling up to whatever is projecting at the screen, whatever the light source is coming from in my dream. And its face was like a lot larger, about the size of my fist. And except its face was furry now, and it almost struck me as like a bee. And it kept popping its head up ever so slightly and dropping back down. And then as I recoiled from that, it came over, this little edging that I couldn't see below, and it was actually, it started to lick my face, and it turns out it was, our cat, Sleepiest, who also has like a black face, and furry face, and all of a sudden it was licking me in the face, and then I woke up. And one of the things that stuck out to me after I told you about this dream was that the stink bug is an intruder. That really resonated with me, because the whole concept of a demon, the whole concept of darkness, is that it's something that you don't want to look at inside of you. And, the Carl Jung's work on what the shadow is, it's repressed content. And the idea is that whatever in the recesses of your inner darkness, whatever you project onto it is what you're going to find. If you think you're going to find demons, then that's what you'll find. If you think you're going to find angels, that's what you're going to find. And so you could look at it as an intruder, like a stink bug, like this annoyance in your consciousness, like an anxiety or a fear that's encroaching upon your otherwise peaceful, mind and spirit. And what was interesting to me as I thought about it, and this is just like basic dream interpretation 101. First you have the idea of the darkness. You have the idea of the repressed, shadow self, or repressed content, and the intruder. And then it turns into what would be a bee, which is still kind of scary, but a bee is also something that we rely on. It produces honey for us. It cross-pollinates flowers. It's not something that we necessarily, go up and shake hands with necessarily, but we benefit. We have a symbiotic, well, maybe not even symbiotic. They don't necessarily benefit from us, but we definitely benefit from the bee. And then of course, our cat, which is super loving all the time to us anyway, in the non-dream world, in the regular world, and always, loving on us, caring on us. We've recently had a child that our cat tries to snuggle with our child like constantly. Um, and so it was like the three layers of what this repressed content could be, in terms of, it could be an invader, it could be a neutral force that we can benefit from if we just sit and listen, or it could be something that like an angel that's coming to us trying to help us, and we feel that sense of connectedness with it, and we love it back. We want to cuddle with the cat, we want to cuddle with our angels, in our internal self, because they're trying to reach out and help us. So that was the that was sort of like the 101 interpretation of and this was just a huge dream. There was all sorts of things going on. That was just a small snippet at the end. That's the climax, what I woke up to. So that's what stood out to me and what I wanted to evaluate even more. But this parlayed into something that I've been thinking about over the past few weeks as well. And this is what I really wanted to talk to you about. And it's this idea of what actually, not in the inner world, although everything is, inner, once you bring in the external content through the senses and everything like that, it's all inner. But what happens when other people attack you on a psychological level, emotional level, like when people launch insults at you or they threaten you, but they're not actually threatening you, like physically, in like the 3D world, they're not actually doing you harm as of that point. Now, that doesn't mean they couldn't, they could later, but their words are indicating that they might. And how we respond to those behaviors and how we resolve that in an internal conflict. So there is a fascinating thing that I experienced growing up, and that was one of the practices I did, in like high school, college, and later on, was I tried to see how I could go about not fearing or reacting to anybody who just insulted me or like said the worst things about me, and just kind of stare at them, hopefully in a mindful way. And what I found was, more often than not, that just completely disarms people. They went from wanting to attack me to just like they just gave up. They just gave up instantly and was like, "Oh, this person has no ill will towards me. They're not gonna attack back, even if they were legitimately attacking. And I should probably defend myself. Like if they're lying about me, if you just said, no, I'm not gonna do anything about it. They gave up too. I saw bullies who would just stop bullying you the moment that you stop caring. Once they saw that you wouldn't falter or you wouldn't fall because of the words they were saying. And if you think about what's going on in terms of their actual quote unquote attack, they're not trying. I've told you this before. They're not trying to attack you. They're trying to get you to attack yourself because their words in and of themselves don't matter. Now, it can matter in the context of it makes perfect sense if somebody's lying about you and saying, hey, this guy cheated on his wife. It's like, well, if the wife believes that, they could very well get a divorce. Lies can actually lead to very negative outcomes. And so there's a very good reason, a legitimate reason, to care about what other people think and care what other people are perceiving the situation to be. And so there is a vested interest that, most humans have in perception control. Because if you get, a psychopath or a neurotic person in your life who just doesn't give a damn about the truth, and they like to see the world burn and they just want to lie about other people, that happens. And they could come into your life and just start lying, and so you have a choice to make at that point. Now, the standard natural reaction is to defend yourself. It's to go out and say, nope, I want to do perception control. And then, of course, you go into that path, and then people can easily accuse you of like, well, you're just trying to change what I think. And, in a way you are, you are directly involved in this, this manipulation of thought in its own way. Even if you're trying to say, hey, well, I'm just trying to get the truth out there. There are people, as you know, who don't give a damn about the truth. They don't even want the truth. They are enemies of the truth. And it is almost an act of violence from you to them to say, well, I want you to know this truth anyway, because then they could say, well, screw you. You're violating my will. And, they're right. It's that's the truth. So, and I sort of realized that as a kid growing up of like, okay, well, I have to make a choice about what I want to do here, because a lot of times when somebody's lying about you, it truly does not matter. It's like you're not going to lose your job necessarily. You're not going to lose important connections or friends in your life, because if people are willing, let's say you actually have friends or you have an employer, just because somebody's lying about you doesn't mean that other people are always going to believe it. You could just kind of sit there and let your reputation speak for itself. If you've been like an excellent, outstanding person for 10 years in a row, and someone comes along and says, you cheated or you lied, and they provide no evidence, you could probably just sit there and be fine, and and nothing's going to happen to you in the external world. But let's take it a step deeper. So you basically have two options. You have the option, like when I'm talking about not defending yourself, because you could defend yourself and go out and try and control perception there. But then there's these other two options, in my opinion, that you have. And the one I just spoke about, that's the one where you say, you know what, I'm going to let my character speak for itself, my reputation speak for itself, let the chips fall where they may, and, you know, I'll be fine. And then there's the other more radical option, which is to also do nothing, also while knowing that negative outcomes will happen. And this is to say, you know what, if somebody wants to defriend me, or if my employer wants to fire me, so be it. Let them, you know, I'm not even going to try and control that option. Now, why would you even go about doing that? Why would you even just completely, you know, drop your guard that far? And the idea is, and I kind of seen this in people before too, the more I engaged in this, I completely do not care about what you're going to say about me, about what you're going to do about me. You can attack me all you want. All I'm going to do is focus on being constructive. All I'm going to focus on is, you know, trying to make things right and do the right thing. There are some people view that in different ways, and one of the ways they can view it is, oh wow, you know, he's de-escalating the situation. I'm probably wrong about this, or they admire the strength behind it, because it also implies you don't even care about losing resources. You may not even care about losing your own life. Perhaps the choice was the value that you place on life, or rather the value that you place on not trying to control others, is more than you place on your own life, which is a radical decision to make. And this is where the philosopher comes in and the sage comes in and says, hey, yeah, you need to make a choice in your life. Like, what matters more to you? Virtue, integrity, honesty. More importantly, the morality of not infringing upon another person's freedom. Because imagine a situation where everyone thinks you're the monster. Everyone thinks you're the enemy. And you make a choice to say, you know what? The evidence is out there for you to see that I'm not. Or maybe there's been planted evidence to make you think that I am. But you could do investigation to figure out even further. But let's say people are like, no, I don't care. I want to just say you're the monster. And if they're making that choice, there's a part of them that wants to make that choice. They don't want to investigate. They don't want to get down to the bottom of the truth of what's actually going on. And who are you to go to them and tell them what to think? And I know this seems radical. This seems completely unnatural to people. But this whole idea of being a disciple of freedom and being a disciple of letting people do as they will, regardless of what their actions are. And I'm not saying that even I would do that in every circumstance, because that's a really hard choice to make. There's some things where I'd say, oh yeah, I definitely would, because I've done it before. The history is, proven that to me. I know this about myself, that there's been plenty of times where lies have been told about me, and I'm just like, let the chips fall where they may. Hey, I could lose all my friends, I could lose my job, it doesn't matter. That's the path I want to take. Now, if my life was on the line, maybe, I don't know. Time will tell if that ever happens, if it ever comes to be that extreme. But this whole idea of beyond that, so the strategy that we all deal with in the mundane level of like, what are we going to do when people lie about us or just make fun of us? Do we react, or do we respond in a mindful way? It reminds me of the Jiddu Krishnamurti analysis of why does something hurt when somebody quote unquote insults us. And his strategy, which I loved, his strategy was, if you take it all in and you really are present, you won't even hurt. Because you'll realize that what they're saying, because one of two things are going to happen. What they said was either true, which means you need to accept that truth and adapt to it. That's natural law. That's, no need to fight back. Or it's false, and if it's false, then that's more talking about them than it is about you. They're just making something up. Either way, why hurt? The reason why something hurts is you need to make an adjustment. I mean, in the physical world, that's easier to see. If you accidentally put your hand on a stove because it's hot, Of course you're going to hurt, but you make the adjustment by moving your hand. But there's also that internal world as well, where you can get in a bind internally. But I think a lot of people are blind on that level. They don't see themselves on that level because we're not an introspective society. We're not an introspective culture. So we can't see. And only those who choose to look within are going to figure out the physics and mechanics on that level. Yeah, you have this choice to make, and I want to take it even a step further. And that is, so that's the reactive way. Like you're letting the world move around you. But what about you influencing the world back? Because I hinted in the beginning of this about the idea that you can completely disarm people. I've seen it way too many times. Of when you just kind of drop all pretense of defending yourself. What that tells that person is one of two things. One, you have no intention of attacking them, even if they're attacking you, which says, oh, wow, they're not a threat to me. At worst, they're neutral to me, from their point of view. They might even be, nice to me, you know. Um, and then, two, oh, wow, they're so strong, it doesn't even matter what I attack. I can, and that's the whole art of the true art of martial arts. You'll defeat your enemy absolutely and completely. Not when you're safe, but when you're stronger than any other attack that they can ever launch against you. Once you make it so you never die, or you don't even care about dying, if it comes to that case, you're free. You've won. So that sends a signal on like an animalistic level, even, of like, holy crap, I can't touch this person. And it's true, they can't do anything to you. Even if they go through the motions of like actually killing you and murdering you to the very end, that your spirit was never broken, and you still stayed to the idea of like, no, I will never betray freedom, I will never betray my own spirit and virtue. On that note, what if um, you have this idea of like, hey, you need boundaries, absolutely. You need to defend yourself, because it's like, okay, you can be reactive to a certain point, but if somebody's coming to kill you, and do you have the right to defend yourself? Obviously yes, but where is that line, and where do you choose to draw that line? And there's this idea that if you say, what I'm asking for this is from like a sage perspective. What if you said, hey everybody, just stop caring about all the things that don't matter? And there's a lot in those attacks that don't matter. The attacks of like, here's this lie. And let's say you even lost friends. Screw the friends that don't care enough about the truth to come to. Do you know how many times I've been in altercations where I've had quote unquote friends that have come to conclusions without even ever asking my side of the story? And what is it in them that says, you know what, I don't even want to ask. I've already come to my conclusion. I know enough about the situation where their viewpoint is completely invalid. It's like, fine, well, you've told me enough about your character that you're not worth it to even keep as a friend. And even if that means you have no friends, so be it. So be it. Because at the end of the day, who is your master? Who is the truth your master? Is freedom your master? Or is it, because everybody kowtows of it. If they need to be friends, if you need those business connections or whatever, or family members, that you kowtow to them and say, you're right, because I've taken that path before, just to see what happens. Tell them what they want to hear, to see, like, do they actually buy it? And they do. There's this whole spectrum of information that people are like, you know what, I don't care about the truth, just tell me what I want to hear. And if you do that, the integrity of our relationship will be maintained. And I've had a lot of time to think about that and what I want to do with that. And, as you know, I'm just like, I'm done. I'm done with that. I have this other path to take. And there will be more magic that comes that way. In fact, I have this whole belief, and I've seen this too many times as well, the moment that you say to yourself, you know what, I value freedom over anything else, I swear unseen forces come to aid and give you the inner strength, the independence that is required to continue to survive by doing your own thing. And I also think that inspires people, because it actually says, hey, everybody, there's something beyond just survival. And it's true. And it's like, I'm willing to stand up for it, and there's many others who are willing to stand up for it too. And that whole spectrum of reality, it's not just some nihilistic, meaningless existence that you're living in. It's like, no, there's been plenty of people who found meaning within that they're willing to stand up for. And, nihilists be damned. It's if you want to keep believing in, this empty reality, so be it. That's fine. You have the perfect right to do that. And so this is the more proactive approach. You go out, yeah, you disarm people just by the natural way that they see that you just don't give a damn about their attacks. And then, all of a sudden their attacks aren't attacks anymore. Their attacks are information. It's just, oh, that's what's happening. Oh, that's what's, and as a martial artist, that's important because you're not looking at it through a sense of fear and tension. You're looking, if a punch is flying at you, you just move out of the way. No big deal. Be easy about it. And now you're going with this flow. And so, yeah, you don't let the person rape you and you don't let the person kill you. You still take your action, based off of that. But what if you said, no, I'm going to wait until you actually launch the real attack, the nature attack, not the little pot shot you take with your words, or although words can lead to real attacks, for sure. And they do damage. I'm not mitigating the value of words here, because the words are still very important here. But it's all about what are you willing to lose along the way, while just saying, I'm not going to fight back. I'm strong. I'm totally independent enough, and really, truly, independence and being self-dependent. Both, the reason why I think attacks hurt people so much is because they need love from others more than they can give them themselves. They have a scarcity of love internally. So, me, you can insult me all day long. You could tell me I'm the most horrible person ever, and I'm like, yeah, well, that's great, because I know I'm not. I know there's certain things that I could work on, but that's because I've done the research. I've looked at myself. I've spent hours, days, months, years looking at my own behavior to assess the validity of my actions. You don't even give a damn to think about it more than 2 seconds. I'm not learning anything from you. And we could prove that if we sat down and talked about it, but we both know we're not going to talk about it. That's the whole point. You're just attacking. That's one thing, is that, people lack that independence because they don't have the inner resourcefulness or outer resourcefulness. If you cut off my money supply, what am I willing to let go of? And then how much can I provide for myself on my own? And these are all things. That's why you need to become as self-knowledgeable, independent as you can. Not because, so you can say, screw you to everybody else around you, but so when the attacks come, you have the option to respect other people's freedoms to the bitter end, to the last bit of it, because that's the change I want to see in the world, is to put freedom on an altar. And to say, you want to be a liar? You want to roll around in the mud? I love you. Go do it. Because until that happens, until you finally escape the power dynamic, the false power dynamic, where everyone's trying to control everybody else, nothing will ever change. Because the power dynamic is within. It's the superego, whatever you want to label it, the inner control, the inner dialogue of you trying to control yourself, and through force, not through an understanding. Think of the strength card and the tarot reading. So I think that's about all the idea that I wanted to convey there. And I think there's a lot of benefit and value in being able to make that sacrifice going forward. People will see that, they'll understand it, and they might even mimic it to some extent. But it's definitely not going to be taught in our culture for the longest time. This is something that will be avoided probably centuries, millennia from now. And you have to wait until some golden age before it actually gets implemented beyond a few sages. But the mundane will probably not engage in this behavior. But yeah, that's what I think my dream was telling me, because it's asking me to reassess what I'm going to do with people. Because I've pissed off a lot of people by saying, here's my boundary. But what if I'm just let them in, because I'm strong enough to let them in, and turn it into information and give them time to calm down. I think that's a choice I need to make. because I've seen both extremes. I've let people walk all over me, and I've put up my boundaries to the maximum extent. I've done both ways, and I've done that to learn. I've done that to see what happens. I've tried to understand natural law and what takes place. And perhaps this dream is telling me to say, hey, when these forces come in, is it a stink bug? Is it a bee? Or is it your cat? To really boil this down back to what the dream was trying to tell me. And that's what I wanted to say.